Hi, I'm Larry Puckett, the DCC guy. Well, today we're going to answer the question that's the title of this video: does DCC have to be so complicated? And this is a spoiler. I'm going to tell you the answer right now. No, it doesn't. For the rest of the story, you're going to have to stick around for the full video. So let's go ahead and get started with that. Hit that little red subscribe button, and when the little bell comes up, click on it and click all. Now, before we get started with the subject at hand, I want to give you a little bit of feedback. And for those of you who don't want to watch the feedback and want to just skip straight to the question at hand, I'll put a timestamp right here below me that you can scroll forward to and skip my feedback comments. But for the rest of you that are interested in what I have to say, let's get started with that. Okay, the first thing I want to talk about is video length, because I've been experimenting some. I've been getting comments occasionally from people that say my videos are too long, that I repeat myself, that I'm a windbag, I like to hear myself talk, all kinds of things like that. And I generally ignore them. But last week, just for grins and giggles, I decided I would go ahead and try to do a shorter video. So I think it came in at about 15 minutes long. Unfortunately, because I had to edit out a lot of content that normally would have been part of the video, some things that were extra were just cut out. And people kept asking me about these kind of things in the comments. Well, that's what happens when I try to make videos that are too short. Now, I don't make videos here for entertainment. So if you're looking for videos of trains running and people playing with trains and things like that, that's not what I do. Okay, I'm here to educate, to teach you guys, and pass along a lot of what I've learned from over 30 years of working with DCC and model railroading. So that's what it's going to be about. And in order to do that, I need to have enough time in each video to make everything as clear as possible. And people keep asking me about stuff that I've covered in previous videos, so I can't depend on you guys actually going back and watching the older videos first to fill in the gaps. So I have to cover what I've covered in the past as well as what's in the video. So these videos, I'm going to go back to my usual format. They might be 25 minutes long. They might be 30 minutes long, although that'll be unusual. But I'm going to put in the video what needs to be in the video to make the content as clear as possible. Now, there's another thing that I need to cover here. And this has something to do with what the video today is really about, and that is the complications of DCC. Now, my viewers range anywhere from just complete newbies that know nothing at all about model railroading and DCC to people who are very experienced and could probably do some of the videos that I do here. So, but then there's a lot of people in the middle. The problem is I can't make a video for every class of a viewer on here. I have to make one video that covers everything when I'm doing a particular subject. As a result of that, I might be covering things and saying things that only apply to the very, very complicated, complex model railroads, the size of clubs that fill entire basements, and I might also be just talking about a small 4x8 foot switching layout, something like that. And in those cases, you know, if I'm talking about a very complex situation, that can make it look very complicated to people who are new to DCC. Well, that's something, you know, you just have to live with. Now, in the future, I will try to point out when I'm talking about stuff that is very complex, and probably is not something that you're going to face if you're building a 4x8 foot or smaller layout. And I'll also point out that a lot of the stuff that is only applicable to the small layouts may not affect you guys at the larger scale. So that's the way I'm going to proceed in the future. And I will, as I say, try to point out when I'm covering stuff that is very, very complex and doesn't apply to very small layouts. So let's move on to answering that question of, does DCC have to be so complicated? Now, as I said in the opening, no, DCC does not have to be complicated, particularly for you people with small layouts, 4x8 foot or smaller. It can be very, very simple. But I'm going to give you 10 tips that will make it a lot simpler for you if you will follow them. So let's get started. Okay, number one, and this is something that applies to people who are looking to buy a DCC system or DCC equipment, as well as people that already have it, and that is read the manuals. You can go online to just about all of these manufacturers and download a PDF copy of their manual. And I recommend that in advance before you buy it. If you're evaluating 2 or 3 different types of DCC systems by different manufacturers, download the manuals, read through them quickly, and get a feeling for how good of a job you feel they've done in presenting the information about their DCC system. Now, another thing you can do is call their tech support number and ask them a question. Just come up with some hypothetical question about a decoder, about a DCC system or throttle, whatever. Just look it up in their manual and ask them, and see if the tech support people actually know what they're talking about. And that's something that you'll find out that there will be some of them that are going to be reading and flipping through a notebook with canned answers. There are people that really know what they're talking about, and then there are people that have no idea what's going on. And so those are the ones you're probably going to want to avoid. I'm not going to bias this by telling you which ones I think are which, but take a look yourself and try that out, because I think it'll answer a lot of questions for you up front. And then one of the things that you can learn from reading through the manual is the second topic that I have to talk about, and that is jargon. Now, with any technical subject, and yes, DCC is a technical subject, you will always have a certain amount of jargon. DCC itself, digital command control, that's DCC is the jargon. Digital command control is what it means. Then there's the CVs, the configuration variables. That's what that means. So there's a lot of this jargon that is in these manuals that you can find, and it's defined fairly well throughout here, but you have to read the manual to understand it. And if you do not understand the jargon, then you're not going to understand a lot of what I say and a lot of what other people say when it comes to DCC. And so you're better off, in the long run, take the time to learn the jargon. And I think in the long run, you will find out it will make your life a lot simpler and make DCC a lot simpler for you. And also, in the future, as I go through my videos, if I spout out some jargon like CV or DCC or anything like that, I will try to remember to at least define it at least once when I first say it. So catch me on that if you will. Number 3, and this is fairly straightforward, but some people really get hung up on it, and that's programming. Now, when I say programming, or when you see the word programming to do with DCC, a lot of people get scared of that. They think they're going to have to learn computer code and things of this nature. Actually, DCC programming is no more difficult than setting up the settings on a TV remote control, because that's what you're doing. You're just setting up certain settings that define how the throttle works, how the DCC system works, and how the decoder responds to your commands. And that's something that, you basically just learn how to do. And it's very simple in most cases. And I've got several videos here on several different systems on how to do programming. I've got some very basic videos that I did 5 or 6 years ago on how to program addresses and CVs and things of that nature. I called it the basic 8 CVs. And so go back and take a look at those, and I think you'll find that it will make things a lot simpler for you if you at least learn how to program an address, how to program the basic CVs, and things of that nature. It will simplify your DCC experience if you know how to do that. Number 4, and this really gets back to programming a bit, and that is when you're setting up consist. And I'll define that. A consist is when you run 2 or more locomotives together at the head of a train or mixed into a train, something of that nature. And it makes your life a whole lot simpler when you're doing that, when you're consisting those locomotives, if you will at least use the decoders made by the same company. Because when you don't have to match speeds and speed tables and all kinds of things like that from different decoder brands, it's so much simpler. when you're trying to make a locomotive with a Soundtrax decoder work with a loc sound decoder, it can get kind of complicated making those speed tables run at, and the locomotives run at the same speeds and responding the same way. And that's what you want to do. Another thing that you have to look out for when running consist is the type of locomotives that you match. Because if you're putting Jeeps and SDs together, 4-axle locomotives with 6-axle locomotives, they can respond very differently and have different gear ratios. They're just made that way. So be aware of that. Most of the different manufacturers will use similar gear ratios though, but that's another thing to look out for is when you're mixing locomotives from different manufacturers, they may not respond perfectly even if you have the same decoder in them. And you won't have to go through the very complex procedure of trying to match the speeds in those locomotives. And I've been through this several times. I've done several videos on speed matching locomotives, and so you can go back and take a look at those. And I mentioned this in the past, that it's a lot simpler if you're using the same type of decoders and at least the same type of locomotives together. Okay, number 5, and this is a very important one, and it comes to wiring. And I know wiring sounds very complicated, and it can be, but you can keep it simple. The most important thing I can tell you is use the correct size wires for the type of layout that you are constructing. If you're in scale, that's 16 gauge wire. If you're in HO, OO, TT, even S, then you probably want to use 14 gauge most of it. For larger stuff, O scale and bigger, you're going to want to probably go up to 12 gauge or even 10 if you've got a very, very large layout and large scale locomotives. And you just have to be aware of that. Use the right type wires and be very meticulous about your wiring. Because I will tell you that probably 95% of the time when people contact me with a problem on their model railroad, it's because they've done something incorrect with their wiring. And it's very, very common to swap feeders to the wrong rails and end up with a dead short. And that's why I always say, when you're working on wiring on your model railroad, stop every few minutes, turn on the power, and see if you've created a short. And then turn the power back off and go back to your wiring. Don't sit there, work all day or all weekend, and then flip the switch and find out that you've got 100 solder connections and one of them is creating a short. That can really make a bad day for you, let me tell you. It's something that all of us run into. I've done it. I've reversed wires to feeders and created shorts, but as long as you stop every 5 or 10 connections and check it out, you won't have any problems. Okay, number 6, and that is use DCC Friendly products. Now, what does DCC Friendly mean? Well, back around 1995, my friend Alan Gartner came up with the concept of DCC Friendly. And in his definition, at the time when he was using it, it meant that these were turnouts that did not contribute to short circuits when a locomotive derailed going through the points or something like that. And there are turnouts that are designed so that if you do derail, it won't create a short, or it's less likely to create a short. There are some of the old power routing turnouts that will short on you without any problem at all. And DCC Friendly is the term applied to the ones you want. The same goes for a lot of other equipment that you will see out there that's being made and has the term DCC Friendly associated with it. It simply means it's been designed so that it works better with DCC. And I've also applied it to locomotives because there are locomotives that don't necessarily work too great with DCC. A lot of the older locomotives were designed where the chassis itself was part of the electrical system, part of the transmission system, instead of using wires. And as a result, there are cases where you hook up two locomotives together and they've got metal couplers and metal pockets and all of that, they'll short out. And so you have to be very careful about using these old locomotives. And I'm talking about Athearns, I'm talking about Atlas locomotives that have a coupler pocket that is built into the chassis. Because a lot of the time, they will short out when you put them together in a consist. And they can be very difficult to figure out, because if you put them one way, they'll work. If you put them the other way, they'll short out. So just be aware that when you're working with older locos. which brings up the next topic, and that is use DCC Ready locomotives, or buy locomotives with your decoder installed in them already, particularly for a sound locomotive. It's got a speaker already installed in it, and all you have to do is plug in a decoder. It is so much simpler than trying to wire it all up yourself. Now, I've done videos where I showed how to do all that complex kind of wiring, and it's not that difficult once you've done a couple of them. But at first, it could be a daunting task to take on, particularly in some locomotives. And let me point out that a lot of the time, if you buy a locomotive with a decoder already installed in it, it will be cheaper than if you go out and buy it somewhere and install it yourself. And it'll be a lot simpler, and you will be able to keep your DCC simple. Okay, number 8, and that is keep your track and your wheels clean. Now, when the Northern Virginia Model Railroaders went to DCC back in the late 1990s, we shut the entire model railroad down for over a month. And we pulled out all the old wiring because, it was a combination of very small gauge telephone wires and all kinds of stuff like that. And it was a mess. So we pulled it all out. We rewired it with the correct size wires and feeders and everything. And it just made the difference, let me tell you, because afterwards, when we turned the power back on, it ran fine. Another thing we did was, and you need to do this, clean the track. Very important, because DCC decoders are very, very susceptible to dirty track issues. And so if you clean your track, get it good and clean, that'll get you started right off. And we did that during that month off. We cleaned all the track. Another thing we did was we had started a project of replacing the plastic wheels on rolling stock with metal wheels. So we completed that. Plus we cleaned all the wheels on the rolling stock as well as the locomotives. And it's very important to do that, because if you clean your rails and get them squeaky clean and your wheels on your locomotives, but you leave all of your passenger cars and freight cars dirty, then right after you start running that stuff, a lot of that dirt on those wheels is going to get transmitted back onto the rails, and you're going to be cleaning rails again. So take the time up front when you get ready to put together a DCC layout to clean the track and clean all the wheels. It'll make your life a lot simpler. I know I keep saying that over again, but that's what this video is about. Okay, number 9, and that's the old KISS principle, K-I-S-S. Keep it simple, stupid. And that basically means that just because you can do something on your model railroad doesn't mean you should. There are a lot of things that you can do that will just make your life a lot more complicated. And one of them is very, very complicated, tricky roundabouts and spaghetti-type bowl wiring, all kinds of things like that, with track that goes all over the place, and double crossovers and scissors and all those things. Just because you can do it, think twice about doing it. The real railroads avoided those kind of scenarios. They only used that kind of track work in cities and places where they couldn't avoid it. And that's the same thing. You should avoid it too, because it will greatly complicate your life if you start doing that. Because trying to get the wiring correct and take care of all of those potential conflicts of short circuits, it can be a real nightmare, let me tell you. So try to stay with a simplified track plan. Don't go with something that is a bowl of spaghetti. Finally, there's the number 10 is be safe, because I went through a whole litany of things in a video a couple of weeks ago, a month ago, about a fire on Ken Patterson's layout. And we talked about the different things that you can do to try to prevent fires. So go back, take a look at that video. And I'll put another link to that at the end of this one so you can find it very easily. But be safe, because there are things that you can do that can contribute to problems. Probably not the kind of things that will cause fires, but there are things that will end up in potentially the destruction of some of your equipment, and you're going to have to send it back to the factory for repairs. So just be aware of that, be safe, and take a look back at that video on safety on your layout, because you don't want to end up like Ken and have a fire on your model railroad. Well, that's a wrap for this video. Hopefully the tips that I've given you here will make your life a lot simpler when it comes to using DCC on your model railroad. So give those tips a try and let me know how it works for you. I'll be back in another week or so with another video. In the meantime, you guys have a great weekend and a great week, and be safe. Bye now.